Today's video, we're going to be discussing how to, first of all, the issue and how to correct it that a lot of agents fall into, the trap they fall into. And then what are we going to do better and how are we going to do it differently? And the name of the game here is to transition our mindsets from the just sold world into actual storytelling. And look, you're probably not alone if you've fallen into the trap of the just sold, just listed. Here's how much over asking price we sold this house for, which I'll say just barely tips the toe into storytelling, but not nearly enough. And the idea here is we're going to go from one closing, we're going to turn that into a story, and then that is going to balloon it out into unlimited reach. And we're going to get into how we do this, why we do this, and what tools we have to help you do it. So, first of all, the just sold trap. Now, we've seen it all the time. Here's what agents post: just sold, 3 beds, 2 baths, over asking. Congrats to my clients. And you'll see people making fun of those agents. They'll say, like, I'm an attorney. Just help this client get out of a parking ticket. Congratulations. Like, you don't see that stuff because other professions don't really do that. So what's missing? Well, what's missing is the emotion, the lesson. There's no real reason to share it. If you post just listed, or I'm sorry, if you post just sold and you're listing just sold for $50,000 over asking price, is that something that somebody's going to click on Facebook and say, "Wow, that's amazing. I need to share this to my cousin"? A high likelihood it's not going to happen. And we know this. We know the facts inform people. It's like the news. You're just giving people information, but they rarely are going to move. A prime example is that Facebook post that you did that says, "We sold this house in 7 days." Okay, is that going to make me move and call you? Most likely not. We love telling people what happened, okay? But what we're going to do now is we're going to tell them why it's important to them and why it matters to them specifically. So here, first, let's talk about why stories even work. So number one is they create an emotion. I feel no emotion if you post that you just sold a house over in San Dimas. I have no emotional attachment to that. Make me feel something. I want an emotion to be created. Build connection. Do clients see themselves in what you just posted? If you just posted that you helped your buyer purchase a home at 2% under list price, I have no connection to that. Do I see myself in that journey? Absolutely not. I'm not buying my house. I'm not selling a house right now. And then, of course, we just said this one: spread further. Are they going to be sharing this with their friends and family? Probably not. And then, sorry, and then make it memorable. If you are posting just listed, just solds, or sold this house in 12 days, or fill in the blank, is that going to stick out amongst a bunch of other agents that are posting just listed, just solds, 5 stars on Zillow? Probably not. It's not sticking out at all. And here's the mantra that I want you to understand with this: facts tell, stories sell. The fact that you just helped a client sell their house, you're just telling me that. You're telling me those facts. Great job, pat on the back. But am I going to be pulled into your story? And as a result, am I going to become a client because of that? It created no emotion. There was no connection built there. I have no desire to spread this message, and I'm not even going to remember this after a couple of hours. So, the change that we are going to make here is the shareable story framework. And here's what the concept is: the concept is you help a client purchase or sell, you help them in a transaction. Now, instead of just telling those facts, we're now going to turn around and we're going to sell the story. And we're going to sell it a few different ways. And we actually have a really cool custom chat bot that will help you through this if you need help with it. Now, the truth of the matter is, this is always the theme with AI. You could do this yourself. And I absolutely think you can. I don't see a problem with it. However, in the Blue Belt course, you're expected to be doing more business. You may not have the time to do that. And here's what most agents default to is they say, "Great, I just helped this client close, but I have 2 other escrows that are in process right now. I'm just going to do a just sold and let's move on. And they just shortchange themselves an entire story. So if that's you, and maybe you're at the purple belt level, maybe you're just a little bit above that, and you're losing out on those opportunities, then the chatbot is a good idea for you. So now here's number one, and I don't know if I have the book here. I do, Building a Story Brand. This is a great book that I highly recommend everybody read. But the idea is stories consist of a really typical framework. There is a before. There's a before of the story. There is a challenge, a problem. There's a process, a guidance in how to solve that problem. There's a result. What's the win? And then this is the big one, the meaning. What lesson or hope does this give to somebody else? And I've heard it said by Donald Miller, the author of that book, you want your audience to raise their hand and think, wow, that's me. That's actually my story. You want them to place themselves in the story. And another way he phrases it is you want to welcome people into the story. Now, again, going back to how we started here, if you're doing a just listed, just sold, you're not welcoming anybody into the story. But if you start talking about how Jane and John were struggling with saving up the down payment for a home and they couldn't save up the money and they ran into all these problems, but then there was a program that you connected them with and they got a down payment assistance program, and now the result is they're celebrating their very first Christmas in their brand new home that they never thought would be possible. Well, now I've just invited a lot of people into that story. Okay. Sorry, let me ignore that call. So this is the difference between reporting a sale and a marketing story, in case that you didn't get that part there. So here is what we're going to be producing. And I feel like this slide might be a little redundant, but what we're going to be doing is we're going to be producing a press release. So this is could be viewed kind of as a newsletter almost, but it's almost supposed to be cutesy. There's a news press release on this client's story. There's going to be an email blast that you're then going to turn around. And again, everyone's fallen into this trap. Instead of blasting to your database of 300 people, hey, we just sold this house. Now it's going to be, hey, meet John and Jane. Here was the struggle that they faced, and here's how we guided them to now enjoying their very first Christmas in their very first home. And then, of course, there's some social media posts that we need to use. And then there will even be a 30-second video script. I think everybody should be on video. If you are so bold, then we're going to give you a 30-second video script as well. But look at how many pieces of content we created. One press release, an email blast, 5 pieces of social media content, and a video script, which arguably that video can be reused of a few different ways. So we're almost at 10 pieces of content telling a story as opposed to one postcard that used to be mailed out by you. Now, here's where I'm going to introduce the chatbot. It is called Catalyst Story. It is your custom AI powered storytelling assistant, and it is built specifically for real estate agents to share the story of their clients. It's called Catalyst Story. If you go into the Chat GPT store and you search the marketplace of chatbots and you type in Catalyst, you'll see quite a few chatbots that we've built. Catalyst Story is one of them. And let me show you kind of what it's going to be doing. It's fantastic the way it works. I still use it to this day. But what it's going to do is it's going to interview you. It's going to ask you about the client. It's going to ask you, I think, up to 15 prompting questions. It's going to ask you, what was the challenge? What did they overcome? What was the result? Now, it's also built, it's designed to exclude private information. So it's going to, it's not going to ask for the address. I don't think it's going to ask for the price, but even then, proofread it, and if there's information in there that you don't want to be used, just delete it out. But what I would encourage you to do, again, I'm not telling you to do anything I wouldn't do myself or I haven't done myself, is put your Chat GPT in audio mode where you can talk to it and have it ask you questions and then give your own verbal answers. Don't type it. When you speak, you're going to get a lot more information out of yourself. Now, something that I want to point out here is, and this is like anything with AI or calculators or computers, it's only as good as the information you give it. So if you give it 1 second, 1 sentence answers to every single question, you're not going to get a great result. But I would encourage you to give as much detail as you can. Okay. We met on a rainy Saturday afternoon. They were already overwhelmed with all the stuff they had to do. They had just come from, just give all the details. It's an interview. What AI is then going to do, what Catalyst Story is then going to do, is it's going to take all that information and it's going to generate all the content based on what you told it. So again, if you don't mention that this was their first purchase because they inherited their first home from their grandparent who passed. And if you don't mention that, AI isn't going to use that. So give it as much information as you can. Now, here's what's going to be released. It'll give you, they're called deliverables. It will give you all the deliverables. It will give you the news style press release, and that's to share anywhere you want: LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I guess. It's then going to take that and it's going to break it down into an email blast, which, by the way, those should read a little differently. Okay. And then it's going to pump out 5 social media posts, probably just the text, with hashtags built into it. And then last but not least, it's going to give you a 30-second video script that I would encourage you just whip out your phone, get on camera, get comfortable being uncomfortable, and talk about this client. You already know the client. So I don't know if a lot of people are actually going to use the 30-second video script. What I would imagine is going to happen is by the time you've done the interview, you've seen the press release, you've read the email blast, you've seen the 5 social media posts, you're probably going to be pretty primed to talk about this story. Pull out your camera, maybe have the 30-second video script there as like a cue, but just talk about the client. Don't talk about the just sold, talk about the story. Okay. And then let me see. Sorry. Closing is raw material. And I think that is a huge aha is you are in the business of closing deals. I understand that. But to turn around and just share that raw data, it's just telling. It's just telling. So we don't want you to report it. We want you to tell it. Every transaction has a human story inside of it. And look, I'm going to say this, and I mean it when I say it. If you get to the point where you stop viewing the people in the transaction as people with a story to tell, then you need to get out of the business. And I mean that. You need to remember that this is a people business. Yes, there's contingencies and there's notice to performs and all these aggressive things, but at the very root of it, there is a story of one person or family that is looking to transact with this one person or family. And that is dynamic. I've heard a leader say that business is not complex. People are complex, and we are in the business of people. So go out there, get your closing, and turn it into a beautiful story with multiple deliverables that is going to get you more clients that are going to raise their hand and say, hey, I think that might be me in the near future because we do have that situation coming up. I'm going to raise my hand and see if this agent can help me just like he helped that family. So I hope this was helpful, guys. Get out there, use Catalyst Story to your benefit. It's free of charge. It's just on the ChatGPT store, and go out there and tell not your story, tell the story of your clients. All right, we'll see you on our next video. I wasn't recording the whole time. Okay, so today's video, we are talking about number one, the trap that a lot of agents fall into. We're going to talk about why they fall into that, how they fall into it, and then we're going to talk about a solution. We have something called StoryBrand that we stole from building a story brand from Donald Miller, and he talks about how important storytelling is. And I've noticed that in real estate, that we as the agents love to share facts, and very rarely are we willing to slow down and tell the story of what just happened. So the title of this class, just sold to shareable story content, one closing, one story, unlimited reach. Now, first, let's talk about the problem that we see, the just sold trap. We There's always kind of satires about real estate agents about how if it's an attorney, they say, just got my client 2 years of probation. Clients, congratulations to me. And they talk about how no other industries stand in front of the camera and talk about what they just did. But in real estate, we love to do that. It's called the just sold trap. And here's what an example of what agents will post. They'll say something like, just sold, 3 beds, 2 baths, over asking, congrats to my clients. I mean, it's just, you're just giving them raw data. That's all you're telling them. You're telling them what happened, what was sold, and you're giving a congratulations. And we'll talk about why that doesn't work. But here's what's missing in that: there is no emotion, there's no lesson. And most importantly, I would say, is there's actually no reason to share that information. Think about it. If every agent is falling into this trap, saying just sold, just listed, blah, 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 and you're one of 15 agents that do that on somebody's feed, you are not going to be shared. You're not memorable. And here's a little fact here: facts inform people. By definition, that's what they do. They are not designed to move them. Facts, and there's a little mantra that I'm going to share in another slide, but we love informing people. Here's what the market's doing, and here's what this house is doing. And we may even just barely dip our toe in the water of storytelling by saying this house sold for 100,000 over asking. There's a little bit of a story in there, but again, is it deeply emotional, and is there a lesson in it? Absolutely not. Okay, we love telling people what happened, but what we need to get into is telling people why it mattered. And again, the reason is because there is a good chance that if you keep sharing why these stories matter, there's going to be people in your audience that you have never met before that are going to start to relate and identify with those clients whose stories you're sharing. So, this is why stories work. And by the way, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. You may have just never had anyone actually identify the parts of why a story works. Number one, stories create emotion. Okay, we know this. We know that if you're reading an emotional story or you're watching an emotional movie, guess what? You start to feel the emotion with those characters. Or if there's an angry moment, you start to feel the anger. Builds a connection. Readers see themselves in your client's journey. There's a great line by Donald Miller, the writer of StoryBrand, where he says, "You want clients to start saying, hey, that's me. Like that, I'm that character." Because as soon as you can get that to start happening, you're going to start winning over clients that twofold. There's a 1-2 punch here that will raise their hand and say they need help, and also because they're doing that, you already have experience working with that type of client. So it's kind of a double whammy, all for good things. Spread further. Once again, if you have a client that you share the story and it's an amazing story, they overcame a huge obstacle. I'll give an example. Meet John and Jane. They were not able to save enough for a down payment. They'd been dreaming of home ownership for 4 years, and their toddlers growing up, and they needed a space, and they wanted to be in a space by Christmas. They were sick of renting, and and we'll get into the story work frame, because we basically help them. Here is the result. And now, if there's anybody in your audience that says, wow, that I actually am in that exact boat. I can't save up for a down payment. I've been struggling financially. I want to learn more about this. And not only that, I'm going to share this story with somebody else that I think maybe may find this helpful as well. And make it memorable. Stories make it memorable. You won't forget. If you're reading on Facebook, if you're going through your Facebook feeds and you see just sold, just sold, just sold, and then all of a sudden there's a story about how this couple got into their house just before Christmas and it was their dream to own a house and this is their first time doing it, you better remember that your audience is going to remember. It is a memorable story. It's a memorable moment. And then the mantra that I love, this is not from building a story brand, this is just from sales, is facts tell, stories sell. And that is a true statement when no matter what industry you're in, facts are going to tell people things, but stories are going to get them emotional and get them to actually make a move, do some type of action, in other words. Now, here's the idea. This is a blue belt course because the idea is that you're already in production. You already have a few things going on. Here's what tends to happen. I'll go back a slide to the just sold trap. Here's what tends to happen. And it's all number one, it could be because you don't know any better. You may just think that posting a just sold is the right move to do. You may think that, no, people want to know a just sold, and why haven't I gotten any traction yet? Now, that's a different world. Hopefully, this is informing that person. But there's another agent. There's an agent that understands that the just sold is not good. There's an agent that understands that they need to tell these stories, but they just closed escrow on this transaction and they have an inspection on this transaction, and this one's about to close in a week, and this one is a listing appointment, and they have too much on their plate. So, although they do see that the just sold trap is just that, it's a trap, and they don't want to fall into it because of all this work that has to be done, they just do a just sold because it's better than nothing. And as a result, they don't do anything. They don't tell the story. So there is, for that specific agent that's a little too busy, and again, this is why this is a blue belt and above course, is there is a chat bot that we built that's going to actually do this. I won't even say for you, it's going to do it with you. And I can promise you that if you gave it about 15 minutes or less, it'll do it for you. But first, let's get into the story, the powerful story. There's 5 parts to it. Number one is there's the before, right? The example that I gave, John and Jane, they did not have a house, they were renting. Okay. The problem they were facing is they couldn't get a loan, they couldn't get the finances right so that they could purchase. The process, we met with them and we guided them, talked to a lender, learned about a program, did a buyer consultation, did looked at properties. The result is they ended up in a home. And this is the part that most agents miss, the meaning. What lesson or hope does this give somebody else? And I think that even if we're well intentioned and we tell the before, the problem, the process, the after, we end there because this step 5 is kind of hard to do. It's kind of difficult to do. And here's what ends up happening. There's the difference between reporting a sale and marketing a story. You have gotten all the way up to this point where maybe you're still kind of reporting a sale, or you're reporting a story, but are you marketing it? Because I would argue that number 5, the meaning, is probably the biggest, most important part about this. Okay. So the chatbot that we built, we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but here's what it will pump out for you. And the next slide, I'll tell kind of how it does it. So it's going to give you a lot of up to about 10 pieces of content, one story, multiple assets. So the first thing it's going to give you is a press release. And I would say this is almost like the master story. It's going to read like a newspaper article. It's kind of meant to be a little cutesy. I would even challenge people to print it on a newsletter style paper and then mail it out. I think that would be exciting. But you're going to get a press release. Post it anywhere you want. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, I guess. It's going to then take that and it's going to create an email blast that's going to be for your database, because those two things should read very differently. And then it's going to give you 5 social media posts with hashtags built into it. So again, what some agents do, if they are going to tell a story, is they cram that whole story into one social media post. But what would it look like if one social media post alone was talking about the process that these clients overcame? What if one post alone was talking about the problem that this client was facing? And then again, the one that's difficult for most people, what if one social media post was all about the meaning? What lesson was learned, and you kind of celebrate that. Okay. So, and then last but not least, this is the last part, is it's also going to give you a video script, a short video script, because we already should know this. Video is king. You've got to get on video yesterday. It has to happen. Okay. So with video, you're going to be able to now articulate the story yourself. And if that scares you, we'll get into that in a little bit. But now here is the solution. Meet Catalyst Story. This is the chatbot that we built. The name is actually Catalyst Story for the record. Okay. Now, how do you find this? Really easy. You're going to go into ChatGPT. You're going to search in the GPT store and you're just going to type in Catalyst and search Catalyst and it will pop up Catalyst Story. And it is essentially, it is your AI powered storytelling assistant that's built for agents. And there's a lot of little things to unpack there. It's built for real estate. So it's designed to build off of what a transaction would entail. It's also designed to not include some really private information. Like if it were to give their name, their address, and their price all together, that's a little bit more ill-advised. And I would always encourage you, it depends on your kind of client. I've worked with law enforcement, they don't even want their names out there. So I'll just give them a different name. I won't use any pictures and I'll still tell the story. You have other people that they don't want people to know how much they paid for the house. They know they could go figure it out, but they don't want that posted. That's fine. Go through the story and edit these things out. But what I want to make sure that we're clear on is, and this is an AI concept, garbage in, garbage out. If you are only giving it the bare minimum details, your story is going to involve the bare minimum details, which means it's not going to form as much of a connection, as much emotion. It's not going to get people to move as easily as if it was in detail. So let's talk about how this works. Now, I personally love this feature of Catalyst Story because what it will do is it will interview you, the agent, about the transaction. And it's designed to ask you, I think, up to 15 questions. But now this is the garbage in, garbage out. If it asks you a question and you give it a 5 word, 1 sentence answer, that's all it has to work on. Now, if you can expand on that and say, he worked a 10-hour job and she had just been laid off, or, if you start to give details into the story, you have to understand that's only going to make the story better. So when you're interviewing, I would actually encourage people to go into narrate mode. So on your phone, or even on ChatGPT on the desktop, I think you can do it. When it asks a question, do not type the answer. I want you to switch to audio mode and talk about the transaction. Talk about, oh, when we met them, it was, they were already overwhelmed just that day alone. They had just had a flat tire. It was pouring rain and they almost canceled the meeting and they were so happy they didn't cancel it. Those are the details that make a story. But again, if you were just typing this up yourself, I mean, think about the levels to this. If you were just typing this up yourself, you'd get a decent story. If you were doing a just sold, you wouldn't have any story. But now we're talking about your story with your voice into the Catalyst story. Now, then what it's going to do is it's going to take all the information you gave it. It's going to interview you. It's going to take all that information and it's going to generate the following deliverables. It's going to give you the news style press release, right? We kind of talked about that one. It's going to give you the email blast that you will then turn around and send to your database. Now, again, think about the different emails that you've sent in the past. If you're like most agents, you've probably sent just sold 3 bed, 2 bath in Highland Park. Congrats to our clients. Oh, man. I mean, you just told them a lot of stuff. You didn't sell them any story whatsoever. Instead, the email is going to be something more to the effect of meet John and Jane. When we met them, they were renting and they were sick of renting. I mean, think of how much better that email is going to read to all of your clients. Okay. Next, it will give you 5 social media posts. Now, again, these social media posts are going to be broken up across the story. For example, I think a lot of agents, I think I said this earlier, they compress all the story into one post if they even do a story. But now this one is going to be our clients had this problem and we guided them through it. And that's just one social media post. And it's also going to give you hashtags that you can then use in your social media posting. And then last but not least, it's going to give you that 30-second video script. The 30-second video script. Now, here's what I will say. I'm not a fan of using video scripts. I'm just not. I don't think they sound right. I don't like how it works. However, what I will say is If you've read through your press release, sorry, let me rephrase. If you've done the interview, and then you've read through the press release that was produced, you've proofread the email blast, you've seen all 5 social media posts, I would be willing to bet that you could get on video and just talk about the story right then. You're kind of primed and ready to talk about the story at that specific point in time. I would encourage you to just pull out the phone, guys, get on video, talk about the story, and then move on. Now, how would you use the video story? Or how would you use the video of the story? Well, Instagram, YouTube Shorts, Facebook. I mean, that's why I said up to 10 pieces because you have a press release, you have an email blast, you have 5 social media posts. So we're at 7 pieces right there. And then if you use that video in just 3 different platforms, you've already hit 10 pieces of content from one story, guys. Now, again, here's the tough thing that I think a lot of agents are going to run into is all this 1 through 4, even the interview process, all this takes time. If you did this all yourself, number one, I tip my hat to you. Number two, it's not practical, especially if you're in production already. So use Catalyst Story to just pump this out. And here's how simple it could be. I've used Catalyst Story multiple times for myself. I open up my phone, I talk about the transaction, and then I hit enter. And then 5 minutes later, all I have to do now is post this stuff. Yes, proofread it, of course, but think of how much faster it is now. I would even argue if I had an assistant that I was paying for that was doing this, it would take them longer. So this is avoid the assistant, use Catalyst Story. Okay. Now, another just perspective is if you're an agent, you've been in the business for a while, which is probably why you're watching this video, you're used to reporting your sales and just throwing out raw material. Here's the days on market for Pasadena. Here's the list to sale ratio in Claremont. Here's how I help this client close in 7 days. You're just reporting the numbers. You're reporting your sales. But here's what I'm going to say. And I say this carefully, but I say it honestly. If you've gotten to a point where you no longer see the clients, you only view it as a transaction with contingency windows and 30 days until you get your check. If that's where you are in real estate, I would encourage you to get out of the business because you need to understand that these are all stories. And the sooner you can get better at telling the stories, the sooner you'll get more clients that are relating to the characters in your story. They're raising their hand and saying, hey, I have that exact problem. I need help. Somebody, Mark Willis had said he's in leadership at a brokerage, and he said himself, he said, business is not complex. Business is actually really simple. People are complex. People are very complex. And we just so happen to be in the business of people. And when you add all the dynamics, the agent, both of the agents, the buyers, the sellers, all these complex personalities interacting, there's always a story to tell. Okay. So here's what I would encourage you to do. Your next closing, maybe it's happening in a couple of weeks. Don't be overwhelmed. I want you to go to Catalyst Story and I want you to just talk into your phone about the transaction. Get the deliverables that come out. Maybe this is already too much for you. Maybe instead of doing a just sold, you're just going to do the new style press release and the email blast. Maybe the social media posting and the videos a little too much for you right now. I would argue these 2 things alone are going to 10x the type of traction that your just solds get. So I hope this was helpful, guys. Catalyst Story is the chatbot. It's free to use, guys. I think everybody should use it. Go out, tell your story, tell your client's story, I should say. Stop telling facts and start selling stories. All right, guys, we'll see you on our next video.